Hello and welcome to Ask an OT. My name is Suzanne Asherson and I am an occupational therapist, and today we're going to talk all about hand dominance. A question came in from a parent stating, I have a 4.5-year-old who is writing and drawing with both left and right hands. We've given him years of opportunity to practice which hand he prefers, but he is still using both hands equally. Now what? All right, let's talk all about hand dominance. What is hand dominance? Hand dominance is using the preferred hand for fine motor activities such as handwriting or coloring or cutting. Hand dominance develops sometime between 2 and 4 years old, but it can take as long as up to 6 years old for true hand dominance to be established. So if a child is struggling with hand dominance, oftentimes I hear parents or caregivers say, my child is ambidextrous. Well, what is ambidexterity? It's when you use both your right and your left hand equally well and competently. For a child though, and in general, ambidextrous individuals is actually not very common, but rather the child may be interchanging their hands for another reason. Okay, and what can be that other reason? Well, there's two different reasons why a child may be struggling with hand dominance. Number one is the child has decreased fine motor strength. So they start coloring with one hand and then that hand gets tired. So they switch their crayon to the other and they continue to color. The other difficulty a child may have is crossing their body's midline. Okay, so that means that if you have a preferred object for that child and it's on their right side, they're going to use their right hand to grab that object. And likewise, if it's on the left side, they're going to use their left hand to grab it. They're not going to cross their body midline to pick up that object. All right, so now let's talk about how to help a child who is struggling with hand dominance. First of all, do not force hand dominance. Rather, offer plenty of different opportunities while that child is playing or at the tabletop doing tasks to use both hands equally in order to determine which hand appears to be dominant. When the child is doing work, observe which hand is the doer hand, so which hand is actually doing the activity, and which hand is the helper hand, and stabilizing the object. One of my best tips for you is to make sure that you always place everything at that child's midline, at their belly button. Why? Well, when that preferred object, like a little car, is at that midline, at their belly button, the child could pick which hand to pick it up with. Just like crayons, put it at their midline, the child can pick which hand they're going to pick it up with. You could do the same thing with snacks or their cup of water. Put it at their body's midline and observe which hand that child is going to pick up that utensil or that cup. And while they are doing all of these different activities, well, this is a great time to do a tally mark moment. Data collection. Super easy. All you have to do is make a quick little tally every time you initially see the child pick up an object either with their left or their right hand. This is going to give you information as to which hand is dominant. You could even ask a teacher at school to also partake in tally mark moments. Any other tips? Absolutely. If you have a child who likes to grab things, tell them to put their hands behind their back. And when their hands are behind their back, then offer them the object and the child could choose which hand to grab it with. In the kitchen, there are plenty of different opportunities while your child helps you in the kitchen to stir, to pour. Watch which hand is dominant, which hand is doing the work, and which hand is stabilizing, the helper hand, which will be the non-dominant hand. I will caution you that sometimes you may see a child like my child when he was about 3 years old. He was always holding his spoon in his left hand. And my mom said to me, I think he's going to be a lefty. And I said, why? She said, because he always holds his spoon in his left hand. I said, that's true. But which hand is he shoveling the food into his mouth with? His right. So my child ended up being a righty, but you have to have that good eye, right? To decide which hand is going to be dominant. Another great activity is using Learning Without Tears wood pieces. There's a really fun song called Tap, Tap, Tap. And with tap, 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 the child can tap the wood pieces. I want you to observe which hand is doing the tapping. Most likely that's going to be the child's dominant hand. You could also watch the child during ball games. Which hand does the child throw with? Which foot does the child kick with? But remember, be cautious because sometimes lefties are going to use their right hand or their right foot in ball games. You could also play pretend games like, okay, let's pretend to brush our hair or brush our teeth. The reason why it's pretend and I'm not having the child actually using a hairbrush or a toothbrush is because the child doesn't have to practice how to hold that actual tool, but rather just pretend to brush their teeth or brush their hair. You can play puppets with children and see which hand that child's holding that puppet with as they're playing. And then also construction. Watch when the child is building. When they're building with blocks or when they're building with things like Legos, you can see which hand the child is using for the Lego to press it together. That most likely is going to be their dominant hand. Just remember it takes several weeks to really figure out which hand is dominant, and it can take a long time. So don't rush it. Remember that development, it can take up to 6 years to figure out which hand is truly dominant. But don't forget everything at that child's midlines, tally mark moments, and plenty of opportunities to use both hands. Why? Because when it's time to help a child to hold their crayon correctly and write their letters, it's important that we are encouraging the child to use their dominant hand. Because if the child uses both hands, that skill of handwriting is going to be split amongst the right and the left hand.